So it was a big day today. We had RFK Jr. go to the Senate confirmation hearing for Secretary of Health, and he was grilled on antidepressants and homicidal behavior and antidepressants making people dangerous. And so today we're going to hear from a psychiatrist reacting to this. Let's check it out.
In 2024, you blamed school shootings on antidepressants. You said, and this is a quote, "There is no time in American history or human history that kids were going to shoot schools and shooting their classmates. It really started happening coterminous with the introduction of these drugs, with Prozac and with other drugs." So do you believe, as you've said, that antidepressants cause school shootings? This should be a simple question.
I don't think anybody can answer that question, and I didn't answer that question. I said it should be studied. So your answer is? I said it should be studied along with other potential culprits, like
so they may cause
social media. But I don't know. I would never make, because there's no science on that,
well,
Senator.
There is, Senator. I mean, there is.
Antidepressants can definitely cause school shootings because it's not. Well, let me put it this way. Yes, there hasn't been a clinical trial where they followed a bunch of people and to see, this many people went on to have school shootings and this many people on the placebo didn't have a school shooting. But it just makes sense that they do, right? Because right there on the label, it says antidepressants increase the risk of suicidal behavior, particularly in young people. So what that means is, when you have two groups, group on the drug, group on placebo, the group that gets the drug have a higher rate of suicidal thoughts and suicidal behaviors. Now, the reason for this is because for some people in those groups, it makes them worse. It causes paradoxical reactions. It makes them more depressed. It makes them more agitated. And for some people, it can make them violent. Before you start thinking that I'm taking the black box warning about suicidal behavior out of context, if you also look at the labels for antidepressants, there's a section in there in the warnings and precaution that says antidepressants can cause manic behavior. And we've seen that before. We've had forensic experts. They went and interviewed the Aurora cinema shooter who dressed up in the Batman costume and shot all those people. And when the forensic expert, Dr. David Healy, went and interviewed him, he was convinced that he was having a manic episode because of a reaction to an antidepressant. And so, yes, when you become manic on an antidepressant, you can go on to do something like a school shooting. The other thing that I would suspect with antidepressants is for some people, they can cause a lot of blunting and disinhibition. So if you're unfortunate enough to react to it in that way, you can become disinhibited and you can also be blunted from the consequences. And that can make people do, things like harm other people through school shootings, but I've also seen it affect relationships. I've seen people break up with their partners or become aggressive before. And so there's a whole manner of ways these medications, when someone has a bad reaction to them, a paradoxical reaction, which are clearly documented on the drug label, that they can go on to do things they wouldn't normally do. So let's keep on going and see the rest of this. And let me just say these are rare. We're talking about rare side effects with people. We're not talking about common things.
The science shows that there is no link between school shootings and antidepressants.
This is classic bull. The science shows, as if you're going, like, what science is she talking about? This is standard, trust the science speak. When there's something unpopular to the powers that be, whether it's a pharmaceutical company or someone who's getting, donations from them, or someone who's just partisan to a particular issue, maybe for political reasons, they'll just wave, science shows at you. But there's no science on school shootings and antidepressants or no reliable science. It's such a rare event. You have to look at it at the level of an individual case and through inference, right? And that's why, when you look at the fact that it's widely recognized that these drugs make people unexpectedly suicidal in some instances, it's not a leap of the imagination that they could make people violent. And so she's just kind of waving the science wand out there, just essentially saying, trust me, it's a load of BS.
And in fact, most school shooters were not even treated with antidepressants. And of those that were, there was no evidence of association.
I don't think you can say that, Senator, because HIPAA rules, nobody knows.
Well, that is, Mr. Kennedy, do you think that people who take antidepressants are dangerous?
I think, listen, I'm not going.
This is kind of a crazy question. Do you think people who take antidepressants are dangerous? No, they're not. I mean, most people who take antidepressants react to them in the normal way. They experience they're experiencing a therapeutic level of emotional dampening or blunting, or maybe a little bit of energy boosting, or maybe some sleep promotion, and they function just fine. The whole issue with unexpected violent behavior or suicidal behavior on these meds is that these are rare side effects. These are paradoxical reactions, Quite like when you get a group of people together and they're smoking marijuana, you could have one person who becomes paranoid while the rest of the group is laughing and having a good time. There are simply some people who don't respond to these meds in typical ways, and when they respond in an atypical way, sometimes it leads to violence.
Into HHS, if I'm privileged to be confirmed with any.
So you can't say that people
to impose any preconceived ideas that I may have. I just want to have good science.
So you're not saying that they aren't dangerous, which means that they could be dangerous. Let me ask you this.
That's not true.
They could be dangerous. They absolutely could be dangerous. Anyone that tries to tell you that antidepressants, safe and effective, blanket statement, run for the hills. I mean, this is someone who's clearly partisan. They have an agenda. They want to be part of these drugs are safe and effective. Don't look here, never question them. They don't really have your best interests in mind.
True.
You've described Americans who take mental health medications as addicts who need to be sent to wellness farms to recover. Is that what you believe?
No, of course I didn't say that anybody should be compelled to do anything.
No, but you said they should be sent.
I said they should be available to them. I didn't say they should be sent.
You said that folks that take antidepressants are like addicts. That I can provide that,
I think
Chair.
they should have the availability. Listen, I know people, including members of my family, who've had a much worse time getting off of SSRIs than people have getting off of heroin. It's the withdrawal period is, and it's written on the label.
It's absolutely brutal. I mean, this is what I do day in, day out. I help people come off these medications. Sometimes when they come off them, it causes brain damage that takes some people years to recover from. And others who've been on them for decades who aren't hurt, when we try and withdraw them, honestly, it takes 1 to 2 years to get them off. If you want to do it in a way where they're not at risk of having any brain damage, and you don't want them to have such severe withdrawal symptoms that it impacts their job. Yeah, we're talking about rewinding decades of your brain adapting to a medication and building around it. It can take a really long time to come off these meds. If this has happened to you, I want to hear about it in the comments below, okay?
I have some experience with this myself, Mr. Kennedy. This is personal for me. When I was a young woman and I was struggling with depression, thankfully, I had the resources to help me get through it, including a new generation of SSRI uptake inhibitors, which helped to clear my mind, get me back on track to being a mom and a wife and a productive, happy person. And I'm really grateful for that therapy. So I have some experience with this, and I think that everyone should have access to that care. And your job as secretary is to...
I don't think he's saying people shouldn't have access to medications if they want to. I think he's trying to bring attention to the fact that, maybe in the past, these medications can cause paradoxical reactions that can make people violent. I believe that's totally true. And secondly, that it's no small thing to get on an antidepressant, because once you're on it, it can be incredibly difficult to come off. So I'm not sure where she's getting at saying he wants to restrict access to antidepressants. I think he's wanting there to be more honest information about them out there.
Is to expand access to care, not to spread lies and misinformation. And the things that you say, Mr. Kennedy.
Lies and misinformation. Again, I don't think what he's sharing are lies and misinformation. Yes, antidepressant withdrawal is brutal. Yes, antidepressants can make people violent. And we just see this, whether it's with medical leaders or people who have an agenda about this, or people in bed with the pharmaceutical industry because, they're getting funding from them. That's what they'll say. If you say something that goes against a drug, they'll start to say it's misinformation, and then they attack you. They'll say, well, you're trying to stigmatize people. You're trying to scare people away from these medications. You're the risk. You're going to make people suicidal. And that's just a tactic that they use.
They live on. They have impact. And, we're having this conversation at the same moment that my Republican colleagues are looking to try to figure out how to save money any way they can. And so they want to cut Medicaid. Let's just think about this for a minute, because you're going to be, should you be confirmed, you would be responsible for CMS, which provides mental and behavioral health care to millions of Americans. Close to 40% of folks on Medicaid have a behavioral health condition. And you would be part of this administration that would be looking to cut Medicaid. So, Mr. Kennedy, these statements that you've made linking antidepressants to school shootings, they reinforce the stigma that people who experience mental health every day face every single day. And I'm very concerned.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't see RFK Jr. going out there saying, if you take antidepressants, you're weak, you should be ashamed of yourself, and I'm going to now shame you away from taking these medications. In fact, what he's talking about is informed consent. He's talking about having honest conversations about the roles that these medications can have in these things. And yeah, I do think, I mean, I haven't seen him talk about school shootings, but I don't think he's ever said that if you get on these drugs, you're going to harm people. But I do believe that in rare instances, it can cause that. And so I think it's completely unfair to say that because he's talking about these things that he's trying to limit access to care. I think what he's trying to do, and I think what we all have a responsibility to do who know about these drugs, is to give people accurate information about them so they can make the right decisions. They should be told, hey, there's a very rare chance that if you get on this medication, you could have an adverse behavioral reaction. It could make you suicidal. It could even, in rare instances, make you violent. And let's have people watch you, keep an eye on you, make sure nothing like that's going to happen. It's super rare. I also think it's fair to say if you get on these drugs, they can be incredibly hard to come off, because that's true. But they twist it. They take someone talking about these risks and saying, oh, he's just saying that no one should get on these drugs and he wants to shame people for being on them. I mean, this is the same stuff that I used to hear as a psychiatrist talking about these risks. Anytime I would bring them up, oh, you're stigmatizing people, you're shaming them. This is just really pharmaceutical defense tactics. Anytime someone criticizes the drug, attack the person, say that they have some malevolent kind of agenda going on, and that they're really just this covert pull yourself up by your bootstraps person. You're weak if you're using meds. That's not what I'm like. That's not what most people in this space of critical psychiatrists are like, and it's not what RFK Jr. is like. We're pro-informed consent, and the truth is these drugs, seldom are people warned about the risks of these medications, and that's what you would want for anyone that you'd love. You'd want them to have accurate information before making a decision about taking this drug or staying on it.
This is another example of your record of sharing false and misleading information that actually really hurts people.
Listen, lady, you trying to say that antidepressants are always safe and effective and there's nothing could ever go wrong with them because you took them when you were a young lady and you had a great experience. That's awesome. You had a great experience. But just because you had a good experience doesn't mean you can invalidate the hundreds of thousands of people who have had very negative and permanently life-altering, consequences in a very negative way because of this. It's just gaslighting, honestly. It's disgusting.
Senator, you're mischaracterizing my statements.
I am only
Here.
putting into the record what you have said, Mr. Kennedy.
You're mischaracterizing my statements, and I'm happy that you had a good experience on SSRIs. Many Americans have very good experience on it. Others have not.
That would be an issue between them and their physicians, and not for the future head of HHS to be putting out misinformation about the dangers of SSRIs and other antidepressant medication, spreading the stigma and the fear that we're actually trying to overcome.
Listen, lady, you are not the medical authority on what is a risk and not a risk. So you getting up here and grandstanding that you know what the science is when you've got it wrong, that's dangerous.
Do you think physicians, when they make that prescription, ought to have access to good science?
Of course they do. And
that's all I believe, too. And you and I are in agreement, Senator.
And to your...
You kind of snuck that in there, which I think is a good point. Most people don't realize that when a pharmaceutical company develops a drug, if a drug fails, if the clinical trial fails, they simply won't publish it. They're doing it more now, but it's only a recent development. And I think Eric Turner a long time ago looked at this and found that, there's almost as many negative studies as positive studies with the antidepressants. And doctors just don't see it because the drug companies don't have to publish it. And they get around it by saying, oh, it's trade secrets and we don't want to publish it. But it's completely deceptive, and it hides the true benefit and risk profile of these drugs. And I do know that RFK Jr. is trying to be involved in getting these clinical trials unsealed so medical professionals can see the full clinical trial database and get the full evidence about these drugs.
Your point that you made when you made these statements, it was not based on good science. I don't know what it was based on.
I was saying the science needed to be done. I was saying these are potential culprits. We're coterminous.
Good science. Let me tell you what good science is. Good science is something that a pharmaceutical company has published in a journal that they pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars to for advertising, which is completely biased, where the editors and the peer reviewers are really partisan to it. That's what, quote unquote, good science is. It's laundered pharmaceutical marketing in journals, and people aren't falling for that anymore.
And I named other things. I said video games. I said social media. I said SSRIs. SSRIs have a black box warning of suicidal.
Mr. Chair, I will submit to the chair the information that I have about what Mr. Kennedy has said, linking antidepressants to school shootings. Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. That was day one of the Senate hearing for RFK Jr. If you watched it, tell me what you thought about it in the comments below.